So yes, I want to carry on, as Kustasara was saying, exploring the Diamond Sutra, or at least Bhante Sangharakshita's commentary on the Diamond Sutra, which is published as a book called Wisdom Beyond Words. Wisdom Beyond Words, and the edition that I have, I don't know if I think it's out of print now, but I don't know if you can see it. It's got this image of Prajnaparamita, as we've got there. It's a very, very beautiful image of a golden figure in a female form. And as we've been hearing, she's often referred to as the mother of all the Buddhas, because she gives birth, wisdom gives birth to the Buddhas. It's through realizing the perfection of wisdom that a Buddha becomes a Buddha, that a person becomes an enlightened human being. And nothing else. It's said that it's nothing else. It's not through good deeds, it's not through altruistic activity or renunciation, or all of those things might be needed for the realization of perfect wisdom, but it's wisdom itself, which is a non-conceptual realization of the way things are. It's a realization that, well, it goes beyond words. That is what leads to the dawning of a new Buddha, the birth of a Buddha. And well, as you probably know, the Diamond Sutra, or the Vajrachedika Sutra, the sutra of that cuts like a diamond thunderbolt, has a very particular place in the Triratna tradition, because it was through reading the Diamond Sutra, through encountering the Diamond Sutra, that Bhante Sangharakshita, at the age of 16, had an insight into into the nature of reality, but also an insight into himself, in that he realized that he was a Buddhist, and that he had always been a Buddhist. Yes, the Diamond Sutra occupies a kind of, particularly powerful, special kind of place. What I want to talk about today in the Diamond Sutra is a passage which is rather mysterious. So we've been dealing with, sort of topics like, do I really exist? Is there a real self as a construct, seeing through the delusion of that, etc., etc. But now the sutra says something which is a bit sobering. I'll just read you the passage from the sutra that I'm going to then talk about, and that Bhante talks about. So it's talking about people who study the sutra. So in a way you could say that's you and me. Those sons and daughters of good family who will take up these very sutras and will bear them in mind and study them, they will be humbled. Well humbled will they be. And why? The impure deeds which these beings have done in their former lives, and which are liable to lead them into states of woe, in this very life they will, by means of that humiliation, annul these impure deeds of their former lives, and they will reach the enlightenment of a Buddha. So that's quite interesting that the sutra is saying that those people, us, who open up to this sutra, who read and study and reflect upon the Diamond Sutra, will be humbled, And then it says, why? Why will we be humbled? Humiliated, you could say, is another word. Why will we be humbled, humiliated? And then the sutra gives its own logic, its own answer, and says that the impure deeds that we've committed in previous lives that would have led to suffering in states of woe after death. Instead, the effects, the karmic fruits of those impure deeds are going to ripen in this life as humiliation. And that humiliation, through bearing it, we'll reach enlightenment. So really kind of, a very traditional, I guess, explanation of why we'll be humiliated. One that may or may not resonate with you. It's fairly foreign to us, this notion of karma, let alone rebirth and karmic deeds ripening. And this is saying unskillful karma will ripen in this life through studying this sutra. So how do we make sense of this? How do we make sense of this? Well, Bhante, first of all, takes it fairly literally. He says that the perfection of wisdom, the teaching of the perfection of wisdom, is very, very powerful indeed. And if you allow yourself to be affected by it, you better watch out. Because he says what will happen is that there will be, if you get a glimpse of the truth of the perfection of wisdom, as Bhante did when he was 16, there'll be a tremendous sort of disparity, incompatibility between how we normally are, our normal, deluded, egocentric selves, and the glimpse that we've had, the glimpse of reality that we've had. There'll be a tremendous incompatibility which will be experienced as a tension. And it's a tension that will need to be dispelled. That's what Bhante says. That tension will need to be dispelled. And he says that the parts of us that are not aligned with the perfection of wisdom, the parts of us that in a way just want a worldly life with me at the center of it, with the self at the center of it, those parts of us, he says, will need to catch up very, very quickly. And he sort of gives a warning. He says that it could even be dangerous, this process of opening up to the perfection of wisdom. If it weren't for the tremendous merit, the punya, the good karma, that it is, traditionally it's said that you gain a lot through realizing the perfection of wisdom. So that protects you from the danger. But I guess what he's, in my own words, what he's saying is that these teachings are not to be messed around with. They've got a power. They've got a real power. And what he says is that it is as well not to study the Diamond Sutra in isolation, at least not without knowing who and where our spiritual friends are. So that's quite interesting, because he's saying that you'll need friends, you'll need support if you allow the Diamond Sutra to touch you, to cut you like a knife, if you allow the perfection of wisdom to enter into your world. Because it's a force, it's electric. And in a certain sense, its sort of function is to just demolish egotism. And that might be a challenging, humiliating process. And it's as well to be supported by friendship, by spiritual friendship, by having a sangha around you. So all of that's quite sobering, isn't it? It's a little bit scary. I must say that in the years that I've been practicing, 25 years or so, I don't know, more than that actually, my own Dharma life, I've just found it more and more fulfilling, and generally I feel more and more happy. It hasn't been a painful process of one humiliation or one setback after another. It's definitely had its challenges, and I'm not saying it's easy. I don't think the Dharma life really is designed to be easy. It will always be challenging. But all I'm saying is it doesn't have to be painful. Mine hasn't been painful, at least so far. I have had humiliations. I was trying to think earlier on while I was having supper what humiliations I've had that I can talk about in public. And what shall I say? Well, it's not, this little story was very early on in my Dharma life, so it doesn't come from having had some profound insight into the perfection of wisdom. I was on a retreat. I was on a retreat team, one of our winter retreat, Christmas retreat teams, and I was. What was I doing? I was in a puja, sort of 120 of us in a puja, and I was, as I say, fairly new. I wasn't even a mitra. Maybe I was a mitra. I don't know. And it was the last night. It was New Year's Eve, and so it was a big final kind of puja, and it was going to be a confession puja, and I'll maybe come back to confession. So it was going to be a confession puja where, during the puja, you could burn, or you could throw into a bowl written confessions of unskillfulnesses that you just wanted to let go of, leave behind, confess to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, confess to the three jewels. Anyway, so I was sitting next to the leader of the puja, and we were about to start, 120 people in this big school hall. We were about to start. We'd been meditating, and then she turned to me and said, "There's no puja, there's no confession bowl, no bowl for the confessions to be put in." And so I said, "Okay, I'll get it. Don't worry, I'll get this bowl." So I got up and went to the kitchen. We were in a school in Oxfordshire in southern England. And so I went to the kitchen, which was, in another building, so, over the courtyard, a few minutes away. I rummaged around in the kitchen and I found this enormous bowl, enormous kind of bowl. So I was holding it with both sort of arms outstretched, holding this enormous bowl. And I walked back into the shrine room, and everybody was standing ready to salute the shrine. And what the way that the shrine room was arranged, there was this sort of aisle down the middle, pointing, to the shrine, and everybody was on both sides of this aisle in a very kind of formal way. They were, for some reason, she'd got them standing, ready to salute the shrine, I guess, or maybe because we'd been sitting for half an hour or so, and to stretch our legs. So everybody's standing up. So I walk in. And so I'm walking down this aisle with this huge bowl, and I can feel that I suddenly realised that I'd undone my belt. My trousers were loose. I'd undone that because when I was meditating, I just, you want to be comfortable. And then I hadn't realised that my trousers were loose. All the way to the kitchen, it was all fine. It was all fine. And I'm with this enormous bowl in public. I'm suddenly thinking, oh dear, my trousers are loose, and so you're sort of halfway. I'm now halfway down the aisle, and thinking, do I very publicly do up my belt, my button, or whatever, my trousers? Do I very publicly do that, or I've only got a couple of yards to go? Do I just reach the shrine and put the bowl down because I'm nearly there? And I go for the latter option, and I get to the shrine. Just as I get to the shrine, they go zoomp. My trousers just fall down. in front of everybody. Just broke out into spontaneous applause, and people afterwards said, I turned around and bowed, of course. People afterwards said that they just thought I'd timed it to perfection, that it was deliberate, but it wasn't. It was timed to perfection. It was like anyway. That was an early humiliation in my Dharma life. A lot of these humiliations in my life have tended to be around teaching or being public or being sort of up front. I can remember another order member who's no longer alive was teaching for the first time in this room that I'm in, and he sort of was saluting the shrine and bowing as you do. And fell into the shrine. He fell into the shrine. But not only did he fall into the shrine, he let out a very loud expletive as he fell. Anyway, so they probably aren't humiliations that are due to having been exposed to this sublime perfection of wisdom. But nevertheless, they do happen in the Dharma life. And if you risk giving talks and leading things, which I hope one day you'll all be able to do, then you are courting humiliation. But the sutra, to go back to the sutra, what I think it's saying is that the Dharma life might not always be plain sailing, and what Bhante says is that it may even be that you come to the Dharma, you start practicing, and things start going wrong in your life. You'd come to the Dharma, no doubt, because you wanted to make your life better. At least most of us do come to the Dharma for those reasons. And somehow it can start making life more turbulent. That's not completely uncommon. You might have found that yourself. And it doesn't mean that the Dharma's not working. It does mean that some deep currents are being upset, that some sort of restructuring is happening. It's like the Dharma, if you sincerely say that you want to practice the Dharma, my experience is that it's as if the universe sort of gives you what you need. It's like the Dharma is a force that meets you. It comes towards you. It comes towards me. And sometimes what we need is, well, as Bhante says in this chapter, it's like we need to be cut down to size. Our self-centeredness, our pomposity, our self-concern, our narcissism, our grandiosity needs to sort of, be directly confronted. At least that's what might be happening. It's difficult to say for sure what's happening, but it's not uncommon for life to become more turbulent at times. So in a way, watch out for that. And as Bhante says, we do need our friends around us when that happens. We do need the Sangha around us. One way I think that many of us will have experienced a certain turbulence is, when you start practicing more skillfully, you have to confront the unskillfulness of the past. You have to sort of bring awareness to unskillfulness that we might have committed in a way that's unflinching, and that can be painful. That can be really turbulent, and it's healthy. It's a purification that's going on. It's a purification, and you do it willingly. I mean, it's not that. Bhante makes this point that even if humiliation, is potentially good for us, taken in the right spirit, even if it's good for us, it's not that we go around deliberately trying to humiliate other people. That's not the idea in saying it's good for you. It's not that. It's just that life will bring us down to size, cut us down to size. And I guess what makes the difference as to whether it's growthful or not is our own perspective, our own attitude. As I say, many of us, when we come to the Dharma initially, we just want to be a little bit happier, maybe a little bit more calm, maybe a little bit more fulfilled. But as we practice more deeply and learn more about what the Dharma is teaching us, we realize that the Dharma is also challenging. It's not just comforting. It's also confronting, because the Dharma is, if it's about anything, it's about growth. It's about growth of consciousness from a small mind to an infinitely expansive mind. It's about growth, and growth often involves growing pains. Often, not always. It doesn't have to. But often it does. Often it involves growing pains. It's like, it's almost like part of us doesn't want to change, even when that change is going to be beneficial. In a certain sense, we don't want to grow, even when that growth will be beneficial, because it's moving into the unknown. It's like taking a risk. And some aspect of us will often resist. I resist growth. I tend to, what's the word? Instinctively want security and comfort. Don't really want to keep putting myself into situations which demand more of me, which are risky, which where I risk failure, where I might risk humiliation. Which are potentially going to stretch me and therefore, cause some sort of discomfort. I've sort of got a deep-seated instinct to sort of have a comfortable life. And fortunately for me, I've got also a deep-seated instinct towards wanting to realize the truth of the Dharma and wanting to grow towards that truth. And so far, fortunately, the latter has just about outweighed the former. Do you see what I mean? I've just about managed to keep putting myself in the direction of growth. And sometimes, left to my own devices, I wouldn't do that. It's because others ask that of me, or I feel responsibility towards the LBC or to the Sangha, and therefore in a way it's drawn out of me. So that's just me and my temperament. I know other people are different, and other people maybe are much more readily up for a challenge. But I don't think I've met any serious practitioner who hasn't at times found it difficult, who hasn't met some sort of inner resistance in themselves to change. And yet, if you're a serious practitioner, you'll find within you the inspiration, the resources to keep moving forward, keep growing. What Bhante says is that if we don't take risks in our life, because we're frightened of failure, because we're frightened of humiliation, if we don't take risks, we'll never grow. And he says that, he's talking about people, young people. Sometimes they're full of potential, and when you're my age, and I look at some of the younger people, some of you, I can see the potential. I can sort of see that there's so much potential for growth, so much potential for, dharmic growth, not just, growth in a worldly sense. So much spiritual potential. And what Bhante is saying is that if you don't take risks, you risk becoming somebody who had a great future behind them, and you become somebody who had a great future behind you because you didn't realize your potential. So I think there's a challenge in this for us, which is, why are we practicing the Dharma? What is it that we desire most? Do we desire just a sort of worldly happiness and hope that the Dharma will allow us to have a smoother ride in life? Or do we desire growth? And if it's the latter, then we're going to respond to challenges, to difficulties, to obstacles with a creative determination to grow. Yeah. If we don't have that attitude, that perspective, then when the obstacles come along, we're likely to give up, and we're likely to say, look, Buddhism doesn't work, the Dharma doesn't work. I thought that meditation would just make me more, I don't know, peaceful. And actually I'm just finding that it's upsetting my life in all sorts of ways. So what is it that we really desire? I think that's so important. And our motives for practice usually need to change as we deepen our practice. So for example, if you come along initially and you want to learn to meditate, and initially everything's going well, you might then want to get more involved, and you join a study group, or you become a mitra, and then some people ask for ordination. You go on ordination training retreats, and you'll be challenged by those retreats. They're designed to be in a kindly way. It's not that somebody's going to kind of beat you with a stick or anything. It's not like that. But they're designed to be challenging. It's not, no, maybe not, design's not the right word. As you go deeper into looking at your life in relation to an ideal that's way beyond your current capacity, that is innately challenging. And that can be uncomfortable. And then if you stick with it and you get ordained, many people think, oh great, I want to get ordained, I want to get a new name, I want to get one of these shiny things. An ordination is tremendously worthwhile, but it's really challenging. Because then you'll have made a public commitment to dedicate your life to living by these ideals, but they're beyond you. The ideals are beyond you. So you constantly find, oh, I've publicly said I am living by these ideals, and then you constantly, if you're like me, find yourself falling short of those ideals. And then if you're publicly teaching, you have to keep acknowledging that. You have to keep saying, oh, I fall short. I don't get up in the morning and meditate, at 7 a.m. or whatever it is, in my case. You have to keep somehow falling short. Acknowledging, you will fall short, or I fall short. You have to keep acknowledging it. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's public, and it is humiliating. Ordination can be a real challenge. But it's not just because of that. It is almost like when you get ordained, you are saying, I want to do this, and you're declaring it not just publicly to other people. It's as if you're declaring it to the universe. You're saying, I go for refuge to these the highest ideals that I can conceive of. And it's as if the universe responds. It's like you've thrown down a gauntlet, and the universe responds with opportunities for growth, opportunities for helping you deepen your practice, and that might not always be easy. Bhante talks about in the tradition there are two types of gurus. There's hard gurus and soft gurus. And hard gurus give you a hard time, and soft gurus are much more congenial. And usually soft gurus have many more disciples, but the hard gurus are said to be the better gurus, but they only have fewer disciples. So he says, paradoxically, it's the guru with the fewer disciples that's often the better guru. And in the tradition, like in the Zen tradition, in the Tibetan tradition, the guru, you sort of, if you asked for a guru, a teacher, and the guru accepts you, there's a bond between you, a pact between you, that you have to, in a way, serve the guru and do whatever the guru says, and the guru has to guide you towards enlightenment. And for better or for worse, we don't do that in Triratna. You can imagine all sorts of, it's open to so much abuse and corruption, etc. But the tradition, that was the traditional model. And a hard guru might really make life very challenging for you in order to purify you of unskillful karma, pride, egotism, an inflated sense of self, practicing the Dharma for the wrong reasons, just wanting success and glory and status. The guru's job is to, as it were, cure you of those impure motives. And he also talks about humiliation in terms of, he says one of the most sort of humiliating things is when you're publicly, your reputation is tarnished or trashed publicly. And he says that's one of the most painful things that can happen to somebody. And of course, actually, unfortunately, in our current age of social media and worldwide publicity at a drop of a button, we do see that again and again, people's reputations being completely destroyed. Sometimes because they have been unskillful, and sometimes in a way perhaps not so unskillful, but their reputation has been lives have been destroyed. And he says, look, if that happens to us as Dharma practitioners, we must learn to use it as fuel for growth, to see it in creative, positive terms. He talks about the example of Hakuin, a Zen master, medieval Zen master in Japan. Hakuin was accused of fathering an illegitimate child, I don't know if it's apocryphal, this, or whether it's got historical basis. Somebody might know, and let me know if you know. So Hakuin is he's a renowned Zen practitioner. He's accused of fathering an illegitimate child. The parents of the mother of the child come to him with the child and say, this is your son, you look after him, you feed him. You can imagine in a very poor family, another child, well, it's also probably very shaming if the girl isn't married, etc. So they give Hakuin the child, say, this is your child. And all he says is that so? Is that so? And he takes the child and he raises the child. And it's said that some years later, as the girl, she must have been a young girl, she grows up, she feels intense remorse because actually it wasn't Hakuin's child. And she'd accused Hakuin in order to protect her, the real father of the child, against his reputation being tarnished. And so she confesses this and she says, it wasn't Hakuin, it was whoever. And so her parents go back to Hakuin and say, we're very sorry, we've made a mistake, all those years ago, please give us back the child. And he just gives back the child and says, is that so? So that's a very kind of strong, powerful example of a completely equanimous response to a public humiliation, with all the consequences of that. And then, I don't know, an equanimous response when he gives up the child again, who he'd raised as his own. I don't suppose we'll ever, hopefully, have to face humiliation that's so life-destroying, but who knows, who knows. And then, of course, we will probably have to face one day old age. If we haven't already faced that or are facing it, we will have to face illness. We will sometimes have to face, I don't know, just suddenly losing our faculties, physical or mental, and or our looks, if we've been attached to looking handsome, beautiful, or whatever it is, and that goes. We will have to face these things. Life will ultimately tear away everything that we think that is ours, that we've got attached to. So there will be humiliation, and practice is surely about becoming more and more equanimous, rising above this mundane, phenomenal world. What do I want to say? I want to say that Hakuin's equanimity in that story doesn't come from just a sort of stoic, forced kind of will. It doesn't come from that, as far as I can imagine. It's not that, the Stoics said, you just bear life, and you bear it, and you stay unflinching in the face of pain. Now that might be a virtue. I'm not saying that's not a virtue, but that's not exactly what we're trying to do as Buddhists, although there might be similarities. The reason that I think it's not the same is because what Hakuin will have, I think, been in touch with is a completely transcendent dimension of consciousness, a transcendent dimension of existence, you could say, although all of those words are somehow not, they're falsifying. He would have been in touch with another dimension, another sort of consciousness, another perspective, you could say. And in the light of what he was in touch with, this worldly, phenomenal perspective, this worldly life of success, failure, praise, blame, pleasure and pain, and loss and gain, they're the 8 worldly winds. Those worldly winds, and all of this phenomenal existence with its kind of material, impermanent material makeup, wouldn't have meant very much to him. None of it. Because he was in touch with something transcendent, something more real, something more beautiful, something more blissful, you could say, in the light of which this world, with all its ups and downs, all its pleasures and pains, wouldn't have held much value. He wouldn't have had the same attachment to it. He wouldn't have taken it seriously in the same way as I do, and probably most of us do. That's because of a transcendent realization. That's because of realizing the truth of the Diamond Sutra. That's because of this direct, non-conceptual opening that we call enlightenment. One of the effects of that will be that everything is put into perspective. And just as, when you were a child, when I was a little boy and somebody takes my toy away, it feels devastating, and you're crying and everything's falling apart. You grow up and that your perspective's bigger, and that didn't matter. That wouldn't matter to you, although maybe your perspective hasn't changed, and it's just that the toys have changed. I mean, that's possible too, isn't it? But let's assume that we grow up and our perspective shifts, and we don't take such things so important. That's what the Dharma's offering us, is a perspective shift. And the ultimate perspective shift is enlightenment, where we would be in touch with a transcendent reality, a consciousness that isn't centered on this sense of me. And then what happens to this physical form, or what the world regards as self, isn't so important. I've had a little kind of glimpse of that, particularly when I've suffered bereavement, and I don't know if this will resonate with any of you, but when my mum died in 2011, for quite a few months, I just had a broader perspective on life, a deeper perspective, a bigger perspective on life. And much of what I was normally preoccupied with didn't feel important. Just didn't feel important. And it was actually a blissfully freeing time. It of course it had its sadnesses, as you'd expect. But for me it was also a tremendously it was one of the happiest times. Paradoxically, it was almost blissfully happy, because for a while I was in touch with this deeper, higher dimension of the Dharma, in the light of which this world of form isn't so important, isn't so real as we normally think it is. I was in touch with something beyond death for a while. I'm not in touch with that all the time, and most of the time I still get caught by the ordinariness of life and its ups and downs. But I do have faith, confidence, a real conviction that it's possible to have an illumined consciousness that's in touch with a transcendental reality that's beyond this world, that's beyond me and you, that's beyond this phenomenal existence, and yet is somehow intimately connected with it. It's not that it's not about me and you, it's about the truth of me and you. It's about who we really are. I know that it's possible to do that, to be in touch with that, to realize that for ourselves. And I believe that it's possible to live from that. It's possible to live from that. And from that perspective, I don't know, all the difficulties of life, they don't mean the same thing. And if we're orientated towards that goal, then I think when life does present us with difficulties and challenges, as I'm sure all of us have experienced, when it does present us with those, we've got the perspective of growth to approach these difficulties in. We can look to them and say, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this difficulty? What do I have to let go of? What am I attached to that is causing unnecessary pain? How do I grow? How do I move towards enlightenment and this experience of wisdom beyond words?